Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions, how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Annie Au, the creator and founder of Soulful Yin Yoga Method, the only teacher training that specializes in the emotional side of Yin Yoga and Chinese Meridians, and where she currently teaches out of Sri Lanka. So I think I even hear like birds in the background. Hi, Annie.
Hello, Jen. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for waking up so early this morning. I have actually never met Annie personally. She is what we can call these days someone I admire on social media, and I had been following her social media presence for some time and reached out to her recently to see if she would accept my invitation to be on Curito Connects, and she said yes. So I'm so honored. And for those who might not know Annie or her story, her yoga journey started in 2012 when she realized after years of feeling stuck and disempowered in relationships that she needed to find herself. So I won't say more and let Annie share with us her own journey and how those impactful moments of searching took her on a path to create Soulful Yin Yoga Method, and why it is important to understand our emotional side when going through our asana poses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for this beautiful introduction. I guess my story started at a young age where I grew up not very connected to my body and my emotions. So growing up, I was a trained ballet dancer. So I started dancing when I was 4 years old, and then I entered professional training at 12 years old. And at that age, my only dreams and goals were to become a professional dancer. So every day as a young child, think about like 12 years old, I would wake up and that's the only thing on my mind. But at the same time, I didn't have the tools and I guess emotional maturity to self-care and self-nourished. So I went through a phase of eating disorders at a very, very young age, about like 15 to 17. And that's when I realized that when you don't take care of your body, you become very emotionally unstable. You know, I wasn't eating properly. And so therefore I was experiencing a lot of anxiety and bouts of depression at a very young age. And also, you know, as a young girl, you also go through body image and when you have such dreams and goals to be a dancer, like everything just added up like to be very overwhelming. So what actually happened that prompted me onto my spiritual journey was my very, very first breakup. So I guess for a lot of people, I can't say for everyone, but your first breakup is very like earth shattering. Especially for me at that young age, I kind of came from this idea that my life is going to be a certain way. I think that came from my strict dance training where like every form has to be like perfect. Everything has like I still am a perfectionist and I try to manage it because now I know better. So my very first breakup was a wake up call, really.
How old were you?
I was 24. So, you know, now I'm in my mid 30s. I'm like, wow, I was very young, but you know, I think it was a very necessary milestone in my journey as a human. And so at 24, I realized that like, okay, your life isn't gonna pan out the way you thought. Like, I really just planned out like until I was 70. I'm like, when I'm 70, I'm gonna be doing X, Y, and Z, right? With this man that I, you know, my very first love. So very, very interestingly, this breakup really just kind of guided me to started doing yoga. So I started doing yoga, you know, in my late teens, so like 17, 18. But I was only doing yoga to get more flexible, to get stronger, like nothing to do with my mind, nothing. I would just be like, okay, like what classes can I do to do the splits to get stronger arms and upper body, right? And when I had that breakup, I would just go to yoga studios and I would just sit at the back. I cannot remember what style of yoga I did. I can't remember what poses I did. I really didn't. The only thing I remember was the sound of Om, where I felt like when this collective sound, when everybody chanted Om, I just felt seen, I felt protected, and just tears would just come down. And that's when I subconsciously was drawn to yoga for emotional healing. So this is
Wow.
only a snippet of my story, though. Like, are we doing okay? Do you have any questions?
We are doing great. Thank you for that introduction. I do want to go back to your beginning when you
Yeah.
were sharing with us that you have a dancer background. You're of Chinese descent. Is that correct? So
Yes.
I do want to kind of throw in that little element there, being raised Asian, right? Like in an Asian household. I'm not sure where did you grow up, and in terms of the ballet career added in, could you maybe share with us a little bit from that angle, like having been raised in a Asian family household, and maybe some of those stereotypes, did that feed into that perfectionist type A personality for you? Was it more triggering, or was it helpful for you to be able to find space when you were struggling as a teen to kind of figure out, like, this is what I really want to do, but how do I do it in a healthy way, right? And you were saying earlier you didn't really have the tools to really figure that out. Um, and then at what point did your ballet career not continue, right? So
Mm.
was that also when you had your breakup and you, like, everything fell apart and you're like, no ballet, no men, just me. um,
Oh, I wish that was what happened. This is also another reason why I was really drawn to coming on this podcast, because I learned, like, from our email that you are. I was assuming you're Chinese, but Asian as well, and I think
yeah.
there is a connection there. It's very interesting. I do have to give a lot of credits to my parents because they are very non-traditional in the
Mm,
sense that they fully, like 1,000%, supported my dancing at a very young age. And they just really believed in investing in my passion outside of my academic. Even at one point, my mom was like, "Can you just finish your university degree so you can just do what you love?" And to me, I really honor that because now I really understand, without the parental nurturing and their understanding, like, I wouldn't have had the chance to even dance, like, let alone to get into a professional career for almost a decade as a dancer. There is an element of perfectionism, but that was never instilled from my parents. I think as so a quick history is that I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and then when I was 10, we moved to Canada.
mm,
So as immigrants, I saw my parents' struggles, just trying to navigate having to speak a different language, having to really go through like minus 30, minus 40 weather when it's always tropical and sunny in this side, in the east side of the world. I think subconsciously, like, you can't really verbalize it as a child, but I was really trying to do my best to honor them for their
mm.
hardship, for their struggle. And so it's really fun to, not fun, but it's actually bringing me a lot of clarity to even talk to you about it now, because for so long I was like, my parents never put pressure on me, but I put the pressure on myself. And I think that has a lot to do with being an immigrant. Um,
Mm.
Even though I wouldn't quote unquote say we're struggling financially, but there's always a barrier, there's always obstacles when you're
Yeah.
entering a new culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm really grateful for my parents for really believing in me.
Yeah. So going back to, at what point did you decide putting your, dance shoes, hanging them and saying, all
Mhm.
right, that's not what I'm going to pursue anymore. No, ballet house, performing on the
Yes.
road, right, as a career.
Hmm. So the breakup, so fast forward, the breakup actually prompted me to to take different choices. So basically, what I did was I took a contract to dance on cruise ships. So normally, this is what artists do when they really need to make money. Yeah, number one, they really need to make money, and number two, they want to see the world. And when I was in my very first relationship that lasted almost 6 years, from 19 to almost 25, and I had a lot of opportunities to go see the world, and I chose not to. And this is what about disempowering, where
Wow.
you just take a backseat on your talent, on your own opportunities. And the first thing that I did was I took a contract and I went to see the world. It was a 1 year contract, and I sailed on a boat around the world dancing. Yeah. So on the surface, it was amazing because I was taking all these beautiful photos. I was
Yeah.
calling my parents like, "Oh, I'm in Egypt today. I'm in India today." But inside, I this is actually so awakening, and this is before I knew anything about yoga, about presence and mindfulness, and any of those. I was just a young girl seeing the world for the first time. I just
Yeah, you were
remember,
living the life. Like
I
that's something
yeah,
that any young 20-year-old would have loved to do, right? Like you're doing what you love and in an amazing way.
no, exactly. This is what everybody thought. It's like you made it. You're living your life, but you know, it's also a privilege as well, having the choice and having the access to have an opportunity like this. But I just felt empty the entire
Mm,
year,
mm.
where you go and see all these beautiful things and all these amazing people, and there's just this void, this unhappiness, this longing for contentment inside. And this is actually what prompted me to go on my first yoga teacher training. And at that moment, like when I got off the ship, I was just lost. I was more lost than before the ship. Um, and I realized it's like, okay, something needs to change. Um, I went for a yoga teacher training thinking it's just another certificate. I'm gonna build another career because I'm done with dancing. I thought, okay, I no longer found happiness in dancing. I'm gonna switch career and maybe I will find happiness somewhere else. And so I went to Thailand. I went to Thailand to do my first teacher training. And that's really where the journey began. I really felt like the breakup was just a trigger to really propel me to look within me, to find myself. And the funniest thing is, it's like it wasn't just taking one teacher training and I found happiness. It took me so long, so many years. It is today is the 10th year of me leading yoga teacher trainings, and I still catch myself of, you cannot find happiness outside of you. You have to come back to yourself. And this is what really brought me back into my emotional healing. Because if you're not happy with who you are, if you're not comfortable in your own skin, you're not connected body and mind, you really cannot be happy instead of finding happiness.
Mm. I think that's a very, very good point. And it's funny that you said that your first breakup really unraveled you. And I was thinking when you said that, I was like thinking, oh yeah, that sounds like my my relationship. Yes, I also had, again, like that around that age, high school, college, long relationship, and then you're like, and exactly what you said, you're like, oh, I thought I was gonna be with this person forever, and like what just happened? Don't really understand. And you feel
Yeah.
like everything's crumbling. You're like, am I not lovable? Like, what's wrong with me? And because I guess society builds this image where it's like school, then career, and then you're in a relationship, and then you should get married. Although obviously that's not really the case anymore. You know, everyone's very open to various types of relationships people have. So I do want to ask, so when you and your boyfriend at the time broke up, was that more like a, you broke up with him, he broke up with you, it was a mutual thing, you know, and then how did you process the emotions then, right? And
Mhm.
in hindsight now, what would you have told yourself then, now, like what you know now? um and just for fun, like, do you still keep in touch with this person?
Yeah. First of all, no, I don't keep in touch with this person anymore. Something I've learned is that there are people who are meant to be in your life for literally a season. That's it. It's like they are there for you. It was not, they shed light in you. They helped you in ways that you really needed, and then that's it. It's like, okay, we are. If I may use the word karma, like the karma has ripened, it's done. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
we have learned everything we need to learn about each other, and then there's no need to keep in touch. To this breakup is so long ago that is, but it's still so fresh in a way, because like you said, when you thought your life is going to be a certain way, and then this person decided not to partake anymore, it takes a huge toll on your self-worth. You start questioning, like, was I not good enough? What happened here? And I have always been at that, I still do now, like a people pleaser. I want to make sure everybody is good and nurtured. And this kind of grew into a codependent relationship where I took a back seat and I want to make sure the other person is happy. And at that age, you don't have the emotional maturity to see that, hey, this relationship is not working out. You have the power to step away. And I didn't recognize that. I didn't recognize I had the power to step away. So I wouldn't say it was a mutual breakup. It was a very sad breakup where I was really hoping that person would say, no, let's stay together. Let's work this out. But in the end, what really happened was I say I was leaving. It's one of those like funny memes. You're like, hold me back. I'm leaving now. Just say the word. I will stay, right? And back, like what I would tell my younger self is that walk away. Walk away and learn your strength. And
mm,
not because you're more powerful than the other person, it's just you have to recognize where the other person is at. And you have to recognize when things are meant to be over, you walk away and you learn from it. And I
yeah,
didn't. I really didn't. And I think for a lot of my healing had nothing to do with that person, has a lot to do with myself. And that's when the whole thing unraveled, where I was like, wow, it started way before the relationship. It
yeah,
started way before, where I cultivated a lot of conditionings as a child, as an immigrant, as a ballet dancer, where I wanted to please the audience, please my parents. I wanted to be perfect in a household where I saw a lot of struggle as an immigrant. And and ballet training has always been hard because it's hard on the inside. You need to make it look perfect on the outside. And then I transferred it to the relationship. So I feel like that's such a past life now, knowing that like so much has happened since in my spiritual path and career and relationship wise. Like I'm married now. I'm very, very content and happy in my marriage. But I think without these experiences, I wouldn't know how to navigate my marriage now.
yeah. Great segue, because I was just gonna ask. That was like my next thing. I was like, okay, like you've kind of laid the grounds. Now I want to go into this, conversation about in your spiritual path journey, right? When you started doing your first training to continuing to find different, like test out different modalities before you found yin and Chinese
Mhm.
meridian, and really navigating the emotional side of be us as human beings, and also your offerings, right? Because that's your expertise area. um how has that period, I guess, in the last decade, 15 years, have you seen yourself kind of shift, right? Like you were saying, everything you told us earlier was like a past life almost, but it was part of your journey. And people who knew you then and know you now probably will be like, oh yeah, she was a very different person then, compared to the person we interact with now. So how would you describe um, being more accepting and loving and happy with yourself? And then in between, I'm sure before you met your husband, you had many other relationships, right? Many other passings, as you said, and you learned from those different relationships before meeting your husband now and being like, oh, this is my person. So that's like one question. And then the other question is kind of how do you apply that to your teachings, and why it's important for men and women and children to be more in tune with their emotional side, right? And to
Mhm.
like acknowledge that space.
Okay, many layers. It's gonna
Many layers.
many layers, because there's a whole decade of lessons about to unpack here.
Summarized version.
I will really summarize it.
Cliff
So
notes. Cliff
basically,
notes.
yeah, oh, I can write a book. What happened is when I embarked on my very first teacher training, it wasn't a regular path of what most yoga teachers did, where they graduated, they go back to their home country, and they start teaching classes. I actually stayed on this little island called Koh in Thailand. And I became an assistant trainer right away when I graduated. So my very first teacher training, I completed it. And then I assisted 6 more teacher trainings within that year. And I literally just took 6 more teacher trainings. And it was in the style of Ashtanga. Okay. Now this is how ignorant I was, because I didn't know the method. I literally only chose that teacher training because the budget was right, the time was right. I like Thailand. I've never been, I wanted to check it out. And when I fell into the style of yoga, it was very addictive. It was actually very healing in a certain way, because it was a beautiful transition from ballet to Ashtanga, because it was so disciplined. It was so disciplined that I go, whoa, this is my comfort zone. I love being told like each breath, each movement, where I look, like when to practice. This is like everything I have been used to my entire life in dance training. But what I realized was, after the first year of being an assistant trainer, I became a trainer. So this is my 10th year of teacher training, because I actually skipped the entire part of teaching classes. I literally fell
Wow.
into the deep end and I became a trainer. Like I fast tracked the entire process, um, which was okay because I was also teaching dancing in before yoga. So the teaching wise was fine. It was more understanding philosophy and just teaching a different format. And but what happened was I started realizing Ashtanga was so strict that I became very strict. There's a saying like Ashtanga police. Like I love Ashtanga still, and I still honor the system. But in terms of my emotional health, I was so strict. I was telling my students, you have to be doing this. You have to show up on time. You can't do this, and that's not a mirror of life. Life doesn't fit into a perfect mold. So those years I had a lot of conflict with everyone around me, because I entered as a new yogi. I fell into a position of authority really quickly, and I was following this system, thinking that it was the only system. That's how ignorant I was. I was still teaching really nice trainings because I was following the method, but I realized that wow, I came to yoga because I want to find freedom. Freedom in my lifestyle, freedom in my mind, and it was a reverse actually.
Yeah.
So it was a reverse.
I was gonna say like perfectionist type A ballerina going straight into an Ashtanga class and doing that is like you just took your rope and you just like
Yeah.
tightened it even more. like like yeah, it's like you wanted to be more free, but no, you went the reverse. It was just like, ooh.
Oh, way reverse, way reverse. At least dancing, you have free expression. Like Ashanga's like no music, no this and that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the Ashtanga listeners here, I still love the practice. It just wasn't for me.
Mm.
So Yin Yoga actually came to me because it was a couple that from France, based in Indonesia, fabulous teachers. They were hosting trainings in Bangkok, and I was living between three places in Thailand at the time. And I took my very first Yin training, and I fell in love with the practice because it was eye opening. I was like, what do you mean? I can just stay in the pose and breathe really? What do you mean? I can close my eyes and the practice was so healing in a way I like I have never felt in my entire life. Um, so
Did you get emotional and cry? Because that usually that happens for in some yin trainings. Like,
interestingly, no. Interestingly, no.
oh,
It
okay.
didn't happen to me. Um, I think because the yin practice, the yin training that I first learned was very anatomically oriented. So
Oh,
the
okay.
whole training was wrapped around naming the muscles and this and that. So there's nothing to do with energy. So
Mm.
the container was still very much physical based. So no, so there was not a whole lot of breakthrough in the training. And so, but then that really just kind of triggered my interest. Like I was really curious. So I actually kept taking more yin trainings. And a lot of the crying didn't happen when I was doing yin training. A lot of it just happened when I was practicing on my own, when life hits really hard outside of the mat. And
Mm.
I just defaulted back to my yin practice because I just felt it was very protective. I felt like I can be who I am on the mat. And so the yin training that I took, a lot of it was just still based on, anatomy and science, and none of it really connected the dots for me. So what happened was I actually self-studied the meridians, and I was integrating it, and I kind of pieced together. I What I really thought to myself was like, well, if none of these trainings are serving the purpose I was looking for, I'm going to create my own. And that's what happened. So I just started piecing together the Chinese meridians knowledge, my own Chinese culture, like things that I've learned just being Chinese, and a lot of readings, a lot of external studying. I studied with Qigong masters, and then I infuse the course together.
Oh, and that's how Soulful Yin emerged, was born.
It was born, and it took about like half a decade to refine to the place where it was, because in between I also became a very devoted Buddhist for 2 years. And I'm going to put a disclaimer here. It didn't go so well to become a Buddhist for 2 years. I started going out with this man. I felt like it was actually at my darkest moment of my spiritual journey, where I felt that my Ashtanga training failed me to heal me, and I was searching for a new style. Yeah, so I
Mhm.
didn't actually jump straight into Yin. For actually, there's a gap. There's a gap between Ashtanga and Yin where I really fully invested in it. And so during that gap, I was very, very, very vulnerable. And I met this person where he was in a Buddhist community, and he was very much this guiding light for me. This is the person I saw to be the one who showed me enlightenment. And so I really just fell into this practice, but
Mm.
to the extreme where the only thing I wake up is about karma. The only thing I think about is about enlightenment. I would, sacrifice my work just to meditate, and I would go on these retreats and neglecting my responsibilities in my world, in my reality. And so, yeah, so it's basically the darkest part of my spiritual journey where I realize you cannot blindly follow one method.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had several encounters with others who have shared and exactly like what you said, they might have been trying, following this particular guru or this particular leader, whatever modality that might be, but it shifts, because you grow, and maybe you, like you said earlier, with the karma, right? They come in
Mm,
passing. So you came in for this particular reason, you took something away from them, and you're like, okay, maybe not for me anymore. And you might go off and search for something else.
mhm,
So I don't think it's like, again, it's like you said, it's not a good thing or a bad thing to have
mhm,
tried it and then been like, this is not for me. Because
mhm.
again, this whole thing is living, in this human form is about you. So you have to kind of figure out what works for you. Right. So I think it's great that you've tried out all these different things, and this is how
Mhm.
you figured out what you want to do. And you've taken everything you've learned from everybody and everything,
Absolutely.
right, to have
Absolutely.
created what you created today.
I was also a very hardcore vegan for about 5 years because that's what yoga teachers told me, right? I would wake up at 4 a.m. to do my pranayama. I would, not eat the food that actually was sustaining me and nourishing me. And I would do these cleanses and fasting in the name of yoga. But in the end, I was blindly following a tradition and then neglecting my health. And what really got me into like, okay, Chinese medicine, Chinese Meridian is the way of health for me is my body started shutting down. I
Mm.
used to fly long haul flights to go for, let's say, you know, Canada to Bali to teach. And I would stop in Taiwan, right? And this entire flight would be like so long. Like I would sleep the entire journey, sleep. And that is because my body cannot take the stress of traveling because I was
Mhm.
so undernourished. I to the point where I would start shutting down. I was very emotionally unstable. Every training, I would be just barely holding on to hold space for my student. But inside, I was really just breaking down. And when I met my husband, this is a good segue. When I met my husband, he really showed me how to do everything in moderation and also how to be real. He's really a man of just being real. It's like, is this your truth? Do you really believe in it? Or are you just following it because you think someone else is going to tell you, you know, what the meaning of life is, right?
Right.
And then I started eating meat, which was a huge thing for me because I thought I was violating 1,000 rules. But the moment I started going back on a meat diet, like meat and vegetables, like a normal diet, my health just skyrocketed. Like I have more energy, I was more emotionally stable, I can see the world more than just myself. Because when
Mm.
you are shutting down, when you are always tired, you can only think about yourself, right? Like, can I extend my love and compassion to others? But when you are just like barely holding on, you only think about like, no, I need to sleep. No, I can't do this right now. And it's just a lot of I involved.
Yeah.
So I have to say, like, my husband really showed me, like, just be real, be kind, understand your own truth. And I started infusing this authenticity in my training. Like, so for
Mm.
a while, my training was still based on like, this is what these yoga philosophies said, this is what Buddhism said, this is what karma is. That's the fundamental truth. But as I started growing and I started evolving myself, I take a back seat and share in my method that there is no fundamental truth. You have to be exposed to many philosophies because that's how we expand our consciousness. But at the end of the day, you have to find your own truth. You have to see what works for you, and that is the only way you can be the kindest person you can be because
Yeah.
you are then authentic.
Yeah. Oh, that was so good. Okay, we're done here. No. Finished. Thank you so much. No, I'm just kidding. No, that was great. Well, we do need to wrap up a little bit
Mm,
soon,
for
but
sure.
before we do that, I do want to also extend that conversation on emotional practice, right? So I think, like you said earlier, with your experiences and trainings, and these different techniques and schools of thoughts, how, like, for those of us who are not familiar with like the emotional side, it's funny you said that when you took your yin training it was more about anatomy and asanas, because when I did my training, I did it with Rachel Fernley, who's based out of Bali, and Jodie Vassallo, she's in Australia. But they integrated the Chinese, the zongyi part, right, the Chinese medicine part, the TCM part, and the meridian. So I learned it through that, which I thought was so interesting, because I was like, oh, I never, again, I also grew up with TCM, so I'm familiar with, like, the meridians and stuff like that, but I never really learned it through that angle. So I was like, oh, that's so fascinating that, like, if you lie in this position, right, you're working your spleen, or you're working your liver, or what you eat, right? So it's all related. But how would you explain to people who are not familiar with this, like, how does it work, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe in a 101, like in the time we have, just a very basic, like, when you practice yoga, or anything you do actually,
Mm-hmm.
how it's important to be more emotionally in tune with yourself, to kind of just ignite that
For
um,
sure.
fire, because I think, especially in a day and age we are in now, a lot of us don't know how to do that, or, like, because we hear it so much, it's like, oh, wellness, like meditation, mindfulness, right? It's becoming a very commercialized and commoditized terminology and industry. But how do you really be more in tuned?
For sure. So I like the fact that you mentioned, like, it's not just yin yoga. Every single thing that we do 24/7 is affected or affecting our meridians and therefore our energy. So essentially, energy means chi in Chinese and prana in Sanskrit and ki in Japanese, right? And it can be moved in three ways: by thought, by touch, and by movement, right? That's why they say wherever your mind goes, energy flows. Or if you get a bad massage, it's a terrible feeling because by touch, someone can negatively affect your energy. Now, in yin yoga specifically, there's a lot of people relating to meridian only because we stay long enough to feel the energy at least, or at least to create change in the body. Yeah.
Mm,
Now, when you're staying in the pose for that long, really you're confronted by your mind. You're confronted by your mind, right? So yes, when you're holding this posture, it affects the spleen, but really is you have to observe what emotions come up because people are more in tune with their emotions than they are with their energy. When you say chi and all that qi gong, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah.
But right, they're like,
You're like, stop being so hippie with me. What do you mean
I
energy?
exactly. Like, what do you mean energy, right? But emotions is a form of energy.
Yeah.
So why I would tie it back to emotion is because when you're in a pose and when emotions start to surface up, that's energy moving. Yeah, that's
Mm,
energy
mhm.
moving. And so therefore, your practice actually first show you what area needed to be focused on. Because if I were to
Right.
put you in a posture and you start feeling angry, it's not intrinsically the posture, it's you. Yeah, something is brewing inside. The posture is just a pressure cooker, right? Now, when I say emotional side of yin yoga is that when you're putting the body in a certain position, not just the meridian itself, but the posture itself is going to show you whether it is more yang, more energetic. Let's say heart openers, it energizes you. Fourfold, it kind of tranquilizes you, right? So you can use it as an emotional healing tool. So if you're feeling really anxious, you can do specific posture like forward fold that targets specific meridian, but you need to do
Mm,
it in a forward fold shape, not in the heart opener shape, because that's going to exacerbate the anxiety.
mm.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's not so straightforward. In the method that I teach, it's not so straightforward that this pose targets the spleen, therefore it removes worry. No, because that's still falling into the cause and effect, that the pose is causing an effect. It's not
Right,
so
right.
simple. In the way is you have to link everything together. including the sequence, the posture, all of it becomes a healing choreography. It becomes a healing sequence because it's collective.
A healing dance.
Like a healing dance, yeah. So I still
Yes.
cannot get out of my dance mode. Um, yeah, so definitely I probably did not answer the condensed emotional 101, but in a way I think a lot of training is still teaching the pose causes is, but
Yes,
in the
yes.
method we're gonna do it in a more holistic way,
Okay.
where one single posture does not lead to a single effect, but you have to link it together, and you have to
Right.
observe the students of where they're at.
Right. So are your all your trainings online, or you'll start as borders open up, you'll start taking in students in Sri Lanka?
So at the moment, we have successfully transitioned everything online, where the course is pre-recorded, but I am available to answer questions within the portal, within the platform. And we also have monthly live classes in our private Facebook membership.
Mm,
And so that has been doing really well because that serves everyone in different time zones, and we still kind of add the live element. We are slowly opening to in-person training. I have a training coming up in Thailand. I'm teaching a 200-hour yin yang teacher training, and then a 300-hour in-person training in Thailand again in September. But in the long run, yes, I will be hoping to bring the trainings to Sri Lanka because it's so beautiful here. I want to show the world how, you know, untouched this country is, and but we will still be doing a lot of online just because not everyone has the privilege to travel. So we
yeah.
still be serving our global audience through the online
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah. I think that's great that you mentioned that, because I think in this circle or in this industry there is that question of like, well, will in person ever come back? Is it all just going to be online now? And every individual teacher and studios, are trying to figure out where, like, what they're going to do going forward, right? So that's
Hmm.
great to hear that there is that balance between the two.
Exactly. Yeah.
So before we close, I usually like to ask my guests what they would recommend for those who are listening and resonate with your story, in terms of like books or things that helped you along the way that you would recommend, and also any 2 cent, words of wisdom that you would share.
So I have three books that I really, really enjoy. Number one is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Hmm.
And this is just a very soul nurturing book that expands your perspective. It doesn't bind with a particular philosophy or religion. It's just like a very beautiful book written about perspective. And I highly recommend that one. And then I recommend two other books. One is by Dr. Gabor Mate, and it's called When the Body Says No. And this is a beautiful book because it talks about how chronic diseases manifest when we have an emotional instability. Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually emotions in imbalances occur way before a chronic disease develops. So this book really puts it in perspective, and it has a lot of science and medical advices backing this. And then the last one is a bit heavier read. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And this is all about trauma healing, about understanding what a traumatic brain does in our real life. Yeah, post-traumatic healing.
Yeah.
So these are the three books I would highly recommend for someone who is interested in, emotional healing journey and soul, cradling journey. So what I would recommend, and my little piece of advice is, your yoga practice should make you happier. It is not meant to be a constraint in any way. If you're finding yourself not shifting, to a happier state, a content state, then you need to review your practice. You need to start
Mm.
seeing how you can modify your practice in a way that meets you where you're at so that it can take you to a happier place.
Right, right. How about for those who are listening but don't practice yoga and not from the yoga world, but really resonate with the whole like breakup,
Yeah,
story and emotional side of like, not being happy with themselves, but like really trying to figure out what makes them happy.
I think start with treating your body like a sanctuary. Start to really self care. Try out the food that would lift you up, that suits your body. Food is really thy medicine because if your body is a well run temple where you feel nurtured, your mind will only get better because of all the neurochemicals that are being pumped into your system. And then the next part is to understand what resonate with your human values. Like, what do you see that, like, what kind of values you want to leave behind? What do you live by? What do you want to tell the world? Because from the body, we can treat the mind, we connect to our mind. And then from the mind, you really reach your values, your spirit.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That was a good one. I'm gonna put those in quotes. Okay. I will put all the resource, like everything you've said, your website, the books you recommend, in the episode resource section, so people can follow you, take your classes online if they'd like, and yeah, keep in touch with you. So thank you so much for your time, Annie. That was a beautiful conversation. Hopefully can meet you in person sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and really opening this conversation. It's really beautiful. Thank you.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.